Everyone will agree with me when I say that if we want to make any progress in life, we have to get out of our comfort zone and move to a place of discomfort. We need to take risks. We need to push the boundaries. This is very true with physical fitness. It's very true in careers and business, in finance, in anything that we do. We need to be pushing the boundaries of where we currently are if we want to experience growth. Unfortunately, we are told, strangely, we are told that spiritually things are different. And spiritually, we must keep within the bounds of the boxes that have been determined by our religion of choice. And religions have become the gatekeepers of what the boundaries of the boxes that are set. And we've been told that if we move outside those boundaries, that we risk hell, we risk our families, we risk our eternal salvation. And so we better not go outside those boundaries. And what happens is we all become these cookie cutter people that look basically identical to everybody else within the religious box that we have chosen. So you might not believe me, but you would believe me if we talked about Pharisees. Oh yeah, all the Pharisees, they looked pretty much exactly alike. They dressed the same, they acted the same, they had the same set of rules. And if anybody stepped outside the boundaries of those rules, then they really slapped them hard and tried to get them back inside the box. And the biggest rebel when it came to the Pharisees and Sadducees back in Jesus' time, the biggest rebel, ironically, was Jesus himself. And Jesus was constantly pushing the boundaries of the spiritual box that was defined by the church. There are those who say that Jesus stayed within the church of his day, but I don't see any evidence of that. In fact, he pushed the boundaries of everybody who had a religious philosophy back in his day, whether they were Pharisees or Sadducees, whether they were the Sanhedrin or the Essenes or anybody else. Jesus was all about pushing the boundaries. And why is that? Was it just to put them in a different box, into the Jesus box? Jesus himself was constantly growing and progressing in light, and was constantly becoming more and more like the Father. And that was the path that Jesus defined his entire life. So you could put anybody's current set of beliefs in a box, but if anybody stays in that box, then just as if you stopped exercising, your spiritual muscles are going to atrophy as soon as you stay where you are. In business, if we aren't growing, if we aren't taking calculated risks, if we aren't pushing the boundaries, we will die. That's just a given. If you aren't taking calculated risks in business, then somebody else will take those calculated risks, and eventually they will succeed where you didn't try, and they will take over, and your business will die. And like I said, this is common in every area of people's lives in the physical world. But in the spiritual world, we are told, don't risk it. Stay in the mainstream of the church, or stay on the covenant path, or just stay where you are, stay put. Yes, you can have revelation, but make sure that revelation doesn't go outside the bounds, which really are a box put around your revelation. Well, if you believe that, and if you subscribe to that, then your spiritual growth is going to have a limit. It's going to be severely, severely limited. You will because of the idol you have set up, meaning this idol becomes the box. Because you've set up and subscribed to that idol, then you will not ever progress beyond that. And what does that look like? Well, it looks like everybody else within that box, and it's cookie cutter. It looks like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and it looks like people with no spiritual power and no connection to God. Now, it's weird saying that about religious systems, that they curtail your ability to connect to God and to have spiritual power. But look around. Who has real spiritual power in the sense that Jesus had spiritual power? Who has real power in the sense that Alma and the sons of Mosiah had spiritual power and went out and worked miracles and just busted through? We don't see that in the religious systems of our day. And it is prophesied that in the last days that that's going to change. In Joel, it says that your young men will dream dreams and have visions. That is going to change in our day. And the question is, are we willing to step up to a higher level so that we can experience the greater levels of connection to God and the greater levels of the Spirit? In order to do that, this is not going to be because God just bestows some gift on you and you receive that. It's going to be because you bust through the artificial walls that have been set up to inhibit spiritual growth. Now, I'm not saying these are set up on purpose. Usually in life, and let's say as parents, we set boundaries for our children to protect them from hurting themselves. And so as a little baby, we would put a baby in a crib with the walls that are high enough so that they can't fall out and injure themselves. Eventually, they graduate to a bed that they can get in and out of, and eventually we let them stray outside of the house, and eventually we let them drive a car and do other very dangerous things that could really hurt people. We give them this because it is necessary if they're going to be independent and be able to be self-sufficient. Why is it that spiritually we don't allow people to be self-sufficient? Why is it that we put a cap on the revelation that people can receive and the spiritual freedom that they have? Jesus spent his time constantly pushing spiritually toward the Father, constantly opening his heart and his spiritual muscles and his ability to communicate with God more and more and more until he had a fullness of the Spirit, it says, until he had a fullness of the Father. This is the path forward. Now, without the boundaries, you do have a risk. You always have risks of failure, but this is the path. Our day is described very well in 2 Nephi chapter 28, where people and the religions of our day say all is well in Zion, yea, Zion prospereth, but it says, and thus the devil cheateth their souls and leadeth them carefully down to hell. The box mentality, the all is well mentality, the mentality that we have already everything that we need, is the mentality of damnation and a lack of growth. Just as with physical muscles, if you are not growing, you are atrophying. And what happens when you atrophy is that your muscle is replaced with fat. And that fat is the spiritual fat, let's say, would be replaced with Satan and his controlling nature. It would be replaced with spiritual leaders who tell you that they they know what you should do. Here, do what we say. Give us your money. Give us your time and your actions, and do what we ask you to do. And your ability to move and progress and have spiritual freedom and happiness and power are curtailed by those other people. Now they're taking possession of your spirituality. They're stealing it away, not because they're stealing it, but because you're giving it to them. Because instead of taking your agency and using it toward becoming who Jesus is and going on the path that he was on toward more and more light and more spirituality and more connection with God, we choose to hand our spirituality and to outsource our spirituality to somebody else. And that actually is the most dangerous thing. We put up the guardrails thinking that it is more spiritually safe to not go outside the boundaries of the box. And at the same time that we do that, we damn ourselves and we actually cause our own spiritual destruction. We all believe that there is this infinite space between us and God, and that we are nothing like God, and yet nobody actually does anything to bridge the gap. Is God powerful enough to change you and to teach you and to instruct you on how to connect to him? Alma talks about experimenting on the Word. This experimentation on the Word is that pushing the boundaries, is the risk-taking of finding out who God is, finding out what his voice sounds like, finding out how to have more of his love, finding out how to be more of a servant like Jesus was, finding out how to be filled with more light and how to give that light to other people. That necessarily includes a lot of experimentation. That should be done yoking yourself to Christ, so that as your spiritual muscle tears and breaks down, it's filled back in with a spiritual muscle that is positive and full of light. Or the other option is to atrophy and allow your spiritual muscle to be taken over by somebody else who is going to tell you what to do. And really, we cannot get by on borrowed light. Spirituality cannot be shared. As the parable of the 10 virgins, those who wanted to borrow oil from somebody else's lamp, they said, not so. Spirituality cannot be gained through a hierarchy. We think somehow that, especially in the Mormon Church, that the highest degree of righteousness is to be subservient to spiritual leaders. That's arm of the flesh. We believe somehow that being subservient to other people spiritually and giving them spiritual authority over our lives and what we do and how we act and how we move is a higher level of spirituality. In reality, it's the same level of spirituality as the children of Israel when Moses asked, or God said, hey, come up in the mountain and see my face. And they said, nah, a little too scary up there. There's some fire up there that might be harmful to us. So actually, Moses, why don't you go up and then you come back and tell us what to do? That is the same spiritual box that most people in religion today put themselves in. They tie themselves to a spiritual leader and tell them, you just tell me what to do and I will follow that. Well, that level of spirituality is going to get you the same level of spiritual power as the children of Israel had under the law of Moses. We're really today, we teach, we preach about living basically the law of Moses, which is I'm going to stay in the box, I'm going to be subservient, and I'm going to do what my spiritual leader tells me to do. Well, your spiritual leader really is Jesus. Your spiritual leader really is telling you that you need to connect to the Father. Your spiritual leader, Jesus, is telling you that you need to take the Holy Spirit as your guide, that you need to learn what the voice of the Spirit sounds like. You need to learn how to know when God's talking to you, how to ask and receive answers to questions from God, how to be filled with the love of God, how to be filled with the Spirit always. That is a continual process of experimenting on the Word that necessarily involves taking spiritual risks and experimentation. That is part of the deal. So in juxtaposition, in 2 Nephi chapter 28, in juxtaposition to those who say all is well in Zion, you have at the end of the chapter God who says that his way is a continual upward way of progress, which is line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little and there a little, and that that experimentation and progress is busting through these boxes and these walls and these lines that are put around us and doing just what Jesus did, progressing grace for grace. So I encourage you to look in a spiritual mirror at your spiritual self and say to yourself, how well am I able to hear the voice of God? How well am I able to feel the Spirit, and how often? How big are my spiritual muscles, or how small, and what needs work? Where do I need growth? And then work on that. Even though it is unseen, even though it is not apparent, those spiritual muscles, your spiritual eyes, your spiritual heart, your spiritual mind, and your ability to connect to God is the most important and will influence everything else in your life if you allow it to. So don't let that atrophy you. Don't let that wither away and be taken over by somebody else, but take control of your spiritual self and grow those spiritual muscles.